From claims of healings and visions to the world's most inexplicable events, whether you're a believer or a skeptic, the truth is always worth the hunt.
EWTN Radio presents The Miracle Hunter with Michael O'Neill.
Welcome to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. This past week, we filmed a new episode of Hidden Gems, Catholic Shrines Across America. That's my new television series that's hosted by Nell Andrzejewski of Catholic Church Tours. We go to the shrines all around the United States and feature the ones, perhaps the big ones and the little ones. But this past week, we were in upstate New York in Auriesville at the Our Lady of the Martyrs Shrine. And that's the 9th episode that we filmed. And coming up at the end of this month in Bartow, Pennsylvania, the National Center for Padre Pio. I know there are so many Padre Pio devotees out there, so people will be excited about that one as well. And that'll be our 10th episode that we filmed. They're currently in editing right now, and you can expect these to roll out on EWTN. And actually, just this past week, we had the St. Jude episode, that National Shrine of St. Jude in Chicago, aired as one of the first episodes to come out of the Hidden Gems series. So stay tuned for more information on when future episodes will be coming out of Hidden Gems. And for today's show, we've got an interesting one. I think this is probably going to be one of our strangest shows that we've ever done. We've got Halloween here right upon us, and this is the perfect time to talk about some of those uncomfortable and strange things that people get excited about this time of year. Of course, we're talking about ghosts, goblins, and demons. And so we'll be talking today with Michael Lichens about, do Catholics believe in ghosts? He has a great new article out on Catholic Exchange. We'll be excited to talk to him about what exactly is Catholic teaching related to ghosts. Is this something that we're supposed to believe in, something we're supposed to be worried about? So he'll try to answer that. And we'll be replaying an interview with Adam Blai later in the show today. He's the Peritus of Religious Demonology for the Diocese of Pittsburgh, and he's the author of the History of Exorcism. We'll be talking a little bit about his views on the devil, and he is the true expert. He's been in those exorcisms himself, and he's seen it all. So we'll be interested to talk with Adam Blai later in today's program. Check out my series, Explore with the Miracle Hunter. It's looping back to the first episode, which is Lourdes. I travel to Lourdes to explore the details behind the Blessed Mother's miraculous apparitions to St. Bernadette and the healing waters that have resulted in inexplicable medical cures. Check that one out. The drone footage on that one is truly amazing of the candlelight procession at night. It's unlike anything you've ever seen before that's been broadcast. So check that out. Explore with the Miracle Hunter, Lourdes. And that's coming up on Saturday at 5 p.m. Central Time. Later in the show, we're going to be looking at the might-be saint of the day, Blessed Selina Cholodinska from Poland, who lived from 1833 to 1913. And the 365 Days with Mary project. For every day, we look at the Marian devotion of the day as it lines up to the day's date. For today's date, October 26th, we have the icon of the Mother of God of the Seven Lakes from Kazan in Russia in the year 1615. And the question of the week, we're staying on this theme of spooky stuff. And the question is, do you, Miracle Hunter, study demonic phenomena? I'll do my best to answer what my take on all this is later in the show. Let's take a look at the miracle news. We do this every week where we talk about the miracles happening around the world and those things that relate to miracles. And for those people who want to catch up on past news or keep up to date on the new miracle news that's coming out, you can connect to the Facebook feed of The Miracle Hunter, and there I post the different stories about miracles happening around the world and those things that relate to miracles. And this isn't miraculous. In fact, it's something of the opposite, but it's something that did happen this past week, or this was scheduled to happen, and prayers are needed. So prayers were needed to dissolve a black mass. And the Catholic Archdiocese of Atlanta has informed its priests and the faithful about a terrible sacrilege occurring in Atlanta on Friday, October 25th. A satanic group held a black mass to summon 3 demons, and this atrocity will be met with prayer from all of the Catholics in the Atlanta area and a divine liturgy at 3 p.m. on Friday, October 25th is being offered to ask God to prevent and to bring nothing of the satanic Black Mass in Atlanta. This was taken from the Epiphany of Our Lord Byzantine Catholic Church in Roswell, Georgia, Sunday Bulletin. And for those people who do not know, a Black Mass is a backwards or an inversion of the true Mass, the Holy Mass. And during this, a consecrated host, the Holy Eucharist, is treated in the most vile ways, and Jesus Christ can't be harmed by any of these actions, of course, but we do not want to allow the Eucharist to be stolen or desecrated. So prayers for this reparation are encouraged. And as of this time of this recording, I do not know if this Black Mass did in fact take place, but nonetheless, let's please pray for this atrocity to be stopped. Let's take a look at Catholic Pub Trivia. We do this every week where we talk about trivia questions and give you an answer, and those who write in the fastest with the correct answer receive a prize, the image of the faces of Mary. You can go to my website, miraclehunter.com, to see that image. And so last week's question was an easy one, I think. We got a lot of people writing in with the correct answer. I always know when it's an easy one when we get lots of responses. But last week, who was the earliest born saint to be canonized who lived in the United States or the territory that would become the United States? Of course, that was a pretty big hint, that last clause there, in a territory that would become the United States. So, of course, it would be St. Kateri Tekakwitha. And she was given the name Tekakwitha, baptized as Catherine, and she was known popularly as the Lily of the Mohawks. She lived from 1656 to 1680, and she's considered a Mohawk Algonquin Catholic saint and a virgin. And she was born in the Mohawk village of Osernanon in present-day New York, and she contracted smallpox during an epidemic, and her family died, and her face was scarred, and she converted to Catholicism at age 19, and she took a vow of perpetual virginity, left her village, and moved for the remaining 5 years of her life to the Jesuit mission village just south of Montreal. She was beatified in 1980 by Pope John Paul II and canonized by Benedict XVI on October 21st, 2012, and she was the first person to be born in the territory of the United States who would later go on to become a Catholic saint. And so thanks for everyone who wrote in with that correct answer. And this week, the question is, we're keeping on the same theme. What are the first words of Jesus to the devil in the Bible? And hint, it's in the Gospel of Matthew. Again, that question, what are the first words of Jesus to the devil in the Bible? And hint, it's in the Gospel of Matthew. If you think you know that answer and want to win the prize, the image of the faces of Mary, send me an email to questions@miraclehunter.com, and we'll see who writes in fastest with the right answer. And answers and winners will be posted on the show page on miraclehunter.com. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to be talking with author Michael Lichens about that big question for this time of year: do Catholics believe in ghosts? Stay with us for that.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. We have Halloween right around the corner, and this is the perfect time to turn our attention, at least temporarily, to those things that may cause us to be spooked or to have some fears. And we want to find out, are these things real? I think a lot of people lump miracles and the supernatural into this big pot or cauldron, as you might be, of various things: UFOs, Bigfoot, ghosts, goblins, etc. But this is the time of year to turn our attention to that, and I think it's a good question. I think there's a question is, do Catholics actually believe in ghosts? And there's a great new article out on Catholic Exchange from Michael Lichens, and we've had him on the show before, but we're having him back to discuss this concept of ghosts. Is this something that, as Catholics, we're supposed to believe in? Have other saints throughout history had the belief in ghosts? What do we make of this phenomena that's claimed both in movies and perhaps in reality? So we're excited today to welcome back to the program Michael Lichens.
Thank you, Michael. It's great to join you all.
Great to have you back, and I really enjoyed your article on Catholic Exchange. Do you believe in, or do Catholics believe in ghosts? And I think it's the timing is obvious. Of course, people are talking about these things this time of year, but I think it's something in the mind of people in general, the supernatural. And I know you focus on that a little bit in your work. What inspired you to write this article about ghosts?
Well, it's a question I contemplate a lot, too, and one of the things I absolutely loved in researching it is that a lot of saints, and not just saints, but also anonymous monks from the 14th century, have written about ghosts and the encounters that Catholics have had with ghosts. And I also found that the question was a lot more complex than I thought.
Yeah, and I think when we look at different polls and things, and you reference this in your article, as many as 50% of Americans believe in ghosts, and maybe even more Catholics believe in ghosts by percentage. So it's something on people's minds, at least at this time of year. And I think, as your article rightly begins with, I think it makes sense to define exactly what a ghost is. What are you calling a ghost in this article?
So we get as I point out, we get the term ghost from the German Geist, which just means spirit. So we can use that term for any time that I use it for any time the spirits of the dead are visiting the living. Although it's probably not appropriate when a heavenly spirits like the Mother of God or some other saints visit the living. That's not what we would quite call ghosts, but we do see that term being used when we're talking about, say, purgatorial spirits, which have a history of visiting the living in the history of the Catholic Church.
And you mentioned that perhaps saints, in fact, have even commented on ghosts. What saints are you talking about here?
Namely Thomas Aquinas, who, along with his own ghostly experiences, for example, he saw the ghostly apparition of his late sister appear to him, as well as one of the brothers from his order. He quotes in the Summa two saints, St. Augustine and Gregory the Great, who both had several stories. Gregory the Great had two. The one I focused on was a story that he told of a bathhouse ghost, the ghost of a late deacon who was, from all accounts, a rather holy and good man named Pasakius. His major hang-up, though, was towards the end of his life. He got caught up in a schism and died during that schism. So while he was a good and holy man, he still found himself in purgatory. And Gregory tells this fascinating story of this Roman deacon appearing to a bishop in a bathhouse amidst the steam. And it's something that's straight out of a movie. You can almost see this shade of this ghost coming through the steam of the bath. And he asked for prayers so that he could get out of purgatory.
Amazing. And we're talking today with Michael Lichens about ghosts. I think this is the exact right time of year to tackle this very tricky topic. We almost would have that sense of avoiding the topic because it's a little bit uncomfortable. It sounds like something that Catholics shouldn't be involved with, but it seems like, according to your research, that various saints have commented about ghosts, perhaps have been visited by ghosts, and then you have things like monks from the 14th century actually writing down ghost stories. What can we make of that?
Oh, I think it shows that, as we see just in researching history in general, ghost stories seem to predate even the written word itself. As long as we've had a concept of things like the soul and the afterlife, we've had concepts of ghosts. And you did hit upon one thing, though, that maybe we Catholics don't like to talk about, and that's because we don't necessarily want to seek out the dead. We don't want to go looking for ghosts. We are not ghost hunters. We don't go to abandoned bars and taunt ghosts to come attack us or anything like that. But once in a while, as Thomas Aquinas points out, God will permit the spirits of those, say, in purgatory to come visit the living, either for our instruction or to correct us.
And is that when we talk about ghosts, is that specifically what we're dealing with here? The holy souls of purgatory, the lost souls, in that way. Are those specifically what ghosts are, according to perhaps Catholic understanding?
In most of Catholic tradition, I would say the vast majority of ghost stories you hear, even in folklore, for example, in the 14th century, there was several ghost stories written down from Bylan Abbey in Yorkshire, in Yorkshire, England. And in all those stories, it's purgatorial spirits visiting the living. So something like 90% of the time when we're talking about the term ghost, we're talking about purgatorial spirits.
And of course, only Catholics believe in purgatory. So, and many people who aren't Catholics believe in ghosts. So people are perhaps believing in purgatory by default, by that association. We're talking today with Michael Lichens about ghosts today. This is the time of year when our mind goes to these things, and in the run up to Halloween. And so when we think about ghosts, I think a lot of course, the number one descriptor of ghosts, or number one feeling about ghosts, is fear and horror. And I think if these are in fact holy souls from purgatory, imparting some wisdom to us, or giving us some warnings of some ways, maybe we shouldn't be afraid. What's your sense of should we fear these spirits that are being reported?
We don't have any reason to fear, because God is able to protect us. In those violent ghost stories I mentioned from Yorkshire, for example, many times people are able to protect themselves from being harmed by ghosts or other spirits by invoking the Holy Trinity. And so we see in even like the strangest but most folkloric of ghost stories that we don't have anything to fear. That said, fear is an understandable reaction to the supernatural. We talk about in the Bible, even when the holy angels are visiting people, they oftentimes have to instruct people to not be afraid. So it's understandable that they would be chilling. And in some cases that we would attribute to ghosts, namely I'm thinking of demonic activity inside a house that secular sources might call ghosts, there's a good reason to be afraid, but ultimately we don't have anything to fear as long as we're remaining in Christ.
And when we're talking about haunted houses, of course, we're then talking about the demonic, correct? It's no longer the holy souls of purgatory who are being referenced in those cases. Is that true?
In almost a lot of the cases, Father Amorth, the great late exorcist, it talks about demonic infestation, and that is particularly when demons will possess an object or a house itself. And that's when you get things like poltergeist activity, hallucinations, noises, growls, things like that. And yeah, when we're talking about those particular types of hauntings, in Catholic tradition, we would understand them to be demonic activity.
Amazing. We've been talking today with Michael Lichens about ghosts. This is the time of year that we would do such a thing. And I was excited to have him on the show today because he's got a new book that's coming out that I'm pretty excited to get my hands on, and we'll have Michael back on the program. It's called The Weird Catholic Handbook. This is out from Sophia Institute Press, as I understand. Tell us, Michael, what is this Weird Catholic Handbook, and what do you cover in this book?
It's a book I like to say it's a big book of stories that's trying to inspire a storytelling tradition to come back again. And it includes, the first section is all about saints and monsters, both the saints who fought monsters like St. George and the Dragon, and also a couple weird cases where the monsters actually converted. And then we also talk about what we've been talking about today, things like ghosts and demons, as well as bone churches, unusual miracles, and saints with very peculiar interests.
All right. Sounds like right up my alley. We'll be excited to have you back on the show for that. And I think that comes out in November. Is that correct? The Weird Catholic Handbook?
Yeah, it comes out November 19th, and you can get it through any major Catholic bookstore.
Wonderful. And you've written throughout the years on Catholic Exchange. I've seen many articles of yours there, and we've talked about some of those in the past. Tell us, where can people find you and perhaps find out more about your work?
Sure. They can, Catholic Exchange, I'll be posting a couple more articles there through October just to keep good with the themes of Halloween and All Souls Day coming up. And then I can also be found at mlichens.com.
Wonderful, and that's MLICHENS.com. And we've been talking today with Michael J. Lichens about his new book, Weird Catholic Handbook, and also ghosts. Is that something that Catholics really believe in? Well, we're so grateful to you, Michael Lichens, for joining us again on today's program, and we look forward to having you back on to talk about your new book when it's out in stores. Thank you so much for being with us on today's program.
Thank you so much. It has been a joy as always.
God bless. That was Michael Lichens, author of Weird Catholic Handbook. Look for that one next month. That'll be coming out from Sophia Institute Press. And check out his article on Catholic Exchange. It's a good one. Do Catholics believe in ghosts? We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to be looking at the question of the week. Stay with us for that.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. Hey, I love getting your questions. People write in from around the world with questions about miracles happening in today's world and those that have happened centuries ago. And I really like getting the questions. People send me these emails, and I think I have the weirdest email inbox in America. But I also like answering the questions in person, and I give talks around the country, maybe 20 a year, where I travel to different Catholic shrines and parishes and in events, conferences. And I usually talk for about 45 minutes. These days I've been speaking about Eucharistic miracles a lot to line up with the Eucharistic revival. And then I always open it up to questions at the end for some minutes, 15, 20, 30, 40 minutes, depending on how many questions people have. And it's really interesting to hear what people are thinking about. If you would like to have me speak at your parish, you can send me an email. You can go to my website, miraclehunter.com, and just click on the Contact tab, and maybe I'll be speaking at a parish in your area sometime soon. And so the question of the week is on theme as well. It's a good one, and I get it all the time, but I'll answer it just because we're talking about this stuff right now. The question is, Dear Miracle Hunter, do you study demonic phenomena? Thank you, Coco. Well, thanks, Coco, for your question. It's a good one. You would think I study a lot. I study everything under the sun related to miracles, of course. We're talking about healing miracles, units and canonizations, incorruptible saints, stigmata, Marian apparitions, weeping statues, the whole gamut of things that the Catholic Church investigates. I look into all those things. But when it comes to preternatural phenomena, that's sort of the opposite of supernatural, meaning those are the things that relate to the devil. Do I spend my time researching those? No. I think there are some experts out there like Adam Blai, who we'll be hearing from later in the program, who really have an up-close and personal look and take on that phenomenon. Of course, I believe that this demonic phenomena really happens and really exists, but I like to spend my time focused on the light rather than the dark. So that's... From my point of view, it's important, of course, to acknowledge that these things happen. It'd be foolish and childish to just pretend that none of this is real. It's definitely real, and there's a definite research done on it and proof that's done on it. But for me personally, I don't spend my time or my energy or my attention on it. So it's obviously up to every believer how they want to view these things. In some backwards way, I think that the demonic, it encourages people's faith, because if you do believe in the demonic, you kind of de facto have to believe in a supernatural world, and you should be believing in Christ and His Church at that point as well. So hopefully people who do have this curiosity are led to the faith as a result. So thank you, Coco, for your question. If you have a question for the Miracle Hunter, you can send me an email to questions@miraclehunter.com, and maybe I'll be answering your question on the air next week. Let's take a look at the 365 Days with Mary project. We do this every week, where we where we look at the Marian devotion of the day as it lines up exactly to the day's date. We all know Fatima May 13th, or Lourdes February 11th, or Guadalupe December 12th, but there's a different Marian devotion for each and every day of their calendar year from all around the world. And so for today's date, we've got the icon of the Mother of God of the Seven Lakes, from Kazan in Russia in the year 1615. And the story goes that the Seven Lakes icon of the Mother of God was brought from Ustug near Kazan on October 26, 1615, by the monk Epithemius, and he was the founder of the Seven Lakes Monastery. He blessed the place with this icon. In the middle of the 17th century, a deadly plague raged throughout Russia, including Kazan, where 48,000 people died within a short time. A monk had a vision of a man appearing to him about the establishment of a 7-day fast and a meeting of the icon coming to them from the city. After 7 days of prayer and procession, the deadly plague ended. A second deliverance from plague occurred in the year 1771, and that is the icon of the Mother of God of the Seven Lakes from Kazan in Russia in the year 1615. For more information on this fascinating devotion, or any of the hundreds of Marian devotions from around the world, you can go to the website 365dayswithmary.com. You can pick up the book. You can download the free app from the iOS App Store, or you can connect to the Facebook page, 365 Days with Mary, and you can join any of the 10,000 followers who get a different title of Mary each and every day of the calendar year. Let's take a look at They Might Be Saints. We do this every week where we talk about people on the path to sainthood, those people who are servants of God, venerables, or blesseds, who don't have all their miracles yet as validated by Rome and are named saints. So this is what I call They Might Be Saints, and I have a television series on EWTN which airs on Wednesdays at 9 a.m. Eastern Time, and I also have a book, They Might Be Saints. I think it's my best one. It's available from EWTNRC.com, where it looks at the 24 people on the path to sainthood. We're talking about venerables and blesseds at this point, and that gets into their life stories, and it's interesting, right? We think all these people, perhaps who are saints, are from a faraway place in Europe, and we think of them on prayer cards and shiny statues and some untouchable view of sainthood that we could never be. But there have been saints from right here in the United States, and so I encourage people to check out that book. This past week we had some big news. Pope Francis, it's the second canonization mass of this year. He placed 14 people in the Church's Registry of Saints. So on October 20th, Pope Francis presided over the canonization mass of 11 martyrs murdered in Syria in the 19th century, as well as 3 founders of religious orders, a Canadian and Italian nun and an Italian priest. In his homily, the Pope stressed that Christians must serve without limits and without any desire for power. There were over 65 cardinals, 200 bishops, 530 priests. They're all seated in St. Peter's Square, and they celebrated the canonization mass, the second one this year. The earlier one that was done, you might remember this, we reported on this, the Argentinian woman Mama Antula was declared a saint, bringing the total to 912. That's the number of saints that has been declared under Pope Francis's pontificate. And as is the tradition, large portraits of the new saints were unfurled on the facade of St. Peter's Basilica, and there were thousands of faithful there gathered in the square who could see the faces of the 11 martyrs of Damascus who were murdered in 1816 in the Syrian capital of Druze, the Canadian nun Marie Leonie Paredes, the founder of the Little Sisters of the Holy Family, the Italian missionary Giuseppe Alamano, founder of the Missionary Institute and the Missionary Sisters of the Consolata, and Italian nun Elena Guerra, the founder of the Sisters of St. Zita, a congregation dedicated to the education of young girls. And a quote from the Pope, he said, "These new saints have lived the style of Jesus' service. The faith and apostolate they exercised did not nourish them in the worldly desires and cravings for power. On the contrary, made them servants of their brothers and sisters, creative in good, steadfast in difficulties, generous to the end." End quote. That's a quote from Pope Francis during this canonization mass. Again, the second one of the year, and it was a big one, where we had 14 new saints. And if we look at the Might Be Saint of the Day, each show we look at the saint whose feast day or death anniversary lines up exactly to the day's date. For today's date, we have Blessed Selina Chuludinska, who lived from 1833 to 1913 in Poland. And her memorial is today, October 26th. And she is from the Sisters of the Resurrection of our Lord Jesus Christ, and she was born on October 29, 1833 in Antywilis in Vilnius, Poland. now in Lithuania. And Selina was early drawn to religious life, but acceded to her parents' wishes, and she married Joseph Borzeka in 1853. She was a mother of 4, 2 of whom died in infancy, and she became a widow, and she founded this congregation. And she died on October 26, 1913 in Krakow of natural causes, was declared venerable in 1982 by Pope John Paul II in a decree of heroic virtues, and Pope Benedict beatified her on October 27, 2007, and that is Blessed Selina Chuldadinska, and with one miracle, she will move on from blessed and will be called Saint Selina. So that is the Might Be Saint of the Day. And check out They Might Be Saints on EWTN, which airs every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. We look at the Americans on the path to sainthood. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to be hearing from Adam Blai, the Peritus of Religious Demonology for the Diocese of Pittsburgh, about the history of exorcism. Stay with us for that.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. Of course, on this show, we talk a lot about miracles and saints and the Virgin Mary and her apparitions and some of these things that have brought great inspiration to us throughout the centuries of Christianity. And then there are those things that perhaps aren't as inspiring, and for some people they inspire fear. We're talking, of course, about the devil and the necessity of the rite of exorcism in our Catholic Church. And we're so excited today to be joined by one of our favorite guests, and that's Adam Blai. He's the Peritus of Religious Demonology for the Diocese of Pittsburgh, and he's the author of a brand new book called The History of Exorcism. Welcome back to the program today, Adam.
Thank you, Michael. It's good to be here.
And I think this, people are fascinated with this topic, both Christians and non-Christians, and the idea that there are demons that need to be expelled through a rite of exorcism. I think that catches some people off guard. Even some Catholics don't fully understand it. But the history dates way back, doesn't it? And I think that from my mindset, I always would think that maybe exorcism began with Jesus casting out demons when he was on the earth. But it dates back earlier to that, doesn't it?
Yes. This is a kind of a universal human experience that you find in all the major religions of the world, and going back as far as we can go in history. So at the time of Jesus, the idea of exorcism was well established, and it was well known that there were kind of itinerant rabbis or exorcists that would go around and do exorcisms. And so it wasn't surprising when people saw him doing it at that time.
And of course, we see Jesus casting out demons in the Gospels, and then we have he confers those powers onto his apostles, who then carry it on further to this modern day. How did it go? How did things progress from the time of Jesus to what we see in early Christianity, perhaps?
So it's a long, and I actually found it a very interesting story, which is why I thought it might be interesting to put it into a book for people. In the very earliest church, we just had apostles and the followers. We remember the 72, the faithful, and then there were the apostles. And in the earliest church, exorcisms were done by people that were thought to be, particularly holy. Usually, these were ascetics, people living kind of like if you think of a cloistered nun or a cloistered monk. These would be kind of the desert fathers, the desert mothers, who had withdrawn from the world. There's no, as far as I can find, there is no reference to a married person or a parent doing exorcisms. It was always people that were really devoted to prayer. So in the early church, it was actually the lay people, and what they would do is they would identify people that seemed to have this gift from God, and then they would bring the possessed to them.
Oh, fascinating. And then how that's an interesting thing that it required some years before the process actually formalized. And when did we see the Catholic Church first going beyond sort of those early days or that transition period from the apostles and beyond to these holy fathers of the Desert Fathers, as you said? Where do we see the process formalizing a little bit and the Church seeing the need to have a rite for exorcism?
Well, you see the beginning of the formalization of it in the 300s, after the Church gets accepted by the Roman Empire and gets a little more stable. You start seeing the effort to produce kind of standard rites of the Church, a book for the Mass and a book for baptisms, and including, a book for exorcism. Now, in the early Church, in those early centuries, from 200 or 300 on up to the Middle Ages, there was not one universal book, and that was true for the Mass and for other things also. It was regional because we didn't have the internet, we didn't have the printing press, and it was kind of a regional church. And so what you saw was, the local version of exorcism, and that took different forms. And during those centuries, you had the transition from particularly holy people doing it to clergy. And so the Church saw in her wisdom that this is a potentially dangerous and difficult ministry, and so started restricting it instead of to remarkably holy people that seemed to have a charism for it, started restricting it to clergy that the bishop would be aware of, as opposed to people just freely doing this on their own. And then eventually they kind of outlawed non-clergy doing the formal exorcisms. Now, people could still pray for deliverance, but in terms of using the Church's official exorcisms, they eventually, through canon law, essentially, though canon law was more primitive in those days, basically made it a restricted ministry. And then in 1614 was the first time we saw a standardized universal version of the exorcism rite that was used throughout the Church wherever it was.
And how long was that actual rite used throughout the centuries, that first rite?
The first standard rite of 1614 was used up until today. It is still in use. In 1998, they produced a new rite of exorcism, which was, by the way, just part of the Vatican II process where every rite of the Church had to be revised. So it wasn't created because there was a deficiency or a problem with the 1614 rite. It was just the law of the council was every rite had to be revised. And so you see the 1614 rite consistently used until 1998. And then it was quickly, basically immediately allowed to use the old rite if the priest wanted to. And then there was a few more shifts in the law, and where things settled were, as long as your bishop says it's okay, you can use the old rite or the new one, basically at will, if that's what your bishop wishes. And then there's some bishops that only let the exorcist use the new rite of 1998.
Fascinating. And we're talking today with Adam Blai, the Peritus of Religious Demonology for the Diocese of Pittsburgh, and author of the brand new book, The History of Exorcism. And if you were to compare the two rites, the one from 1614 and the one from 1998, what changed? Is it a matter of language, or is something dramatically different between the two?
There's kind of two levels of changes there, Michael. The first one is the approach. And so the theological approach of the old rite was to essentially remind the demon of what it was, remind it of its station through gospel readings, psalms, and other adjurations that were in the rite, and then command it to give up its name and then command it to leave. And that's something, that command was between the exorcist and the demon. The new rite has a different theological approach that essentially asks the Holy Spirit, through the baptismal graces and the baptismal promises that the person has received, asking the Holy Spirit to cast the demon out. Now, they did include as optional prayers some of that more combative language that we see in the 1614 rite. There was some feedback from the exorcists around the world, and they kind of rolled back in some of that combative direct language. But essentially, the theological approach is quite different. And, of course, you might be thinking ahead and wondering, what if the person's not baptized? Is this applicable? And that's an interesting question. And we kind of rely on the mercy and the grace of God and I think some exorcists just change some of the wording because of the necessity. If a person's not baptized, we can't call on the baptismal promises there. So, that's an interesting wrinkle with the new rite.
Fascinating. We're talking today with Adam Blai, Peritus of Religious Demonology for the Diocese of Pittsburgh, and author of the brand new book, The History of Exorcism, from Sophia Institute Press. And when we look at the guidelines that come down to us for exorcists, we see St. Charles Borromeo as being influential in that production. Who was he, and why was he so influential with the guidelines for exorcism?
Well, he was influential there was actually a number of saints that were influential, but he was influential for having some knowledge of this in terms of the practical ministry, both that had been passed down through the centuries, kind of tips and guidelines that have been passed down from experienced exorcists, but also because he was regarded as knowledgeable about angelology and dealing with the supernatural, and in the case of the demons, the preternatural. And so there was, you're looking for somebody with some experience with exorcism that's practical, but also somebody that has a proper theological understanding of what these creatures are, and that leads to kind of an increased facility in how you deal with them. So if you understand how their mind works a little bit, or their position before God, if you understand that clearly, you can cut through a lot of the demonic tricks and distractions because you know the truth of the situation. And so he had a lot of these insights, both practical and theological, that led to being really helpful in writing the guidelines.
And in your book, The History of Exorcism, you also mention other saints who helped drive out demons, even from the great beyond. Who are some of these saints that you feature in your book? Well,
what the Church discovered fairly early on with saints in general was that at the tombs of people that were regarded as particularly holy or regarded as saints, just taking somebody troubled to that tomb would sometimes free them. And actually, in some regions, they would just bring the person and keep them in the tomb or the church that had the crypt in it overnight, and the person would sometimes be freed by morning. And this was also, there's a parallel with this with healings that the church noticed early on around the bodies of saints, which is what led to what we see with relics today, where, this veneration of relics or bringing relics. So you're essentially bringing part of the tomb to the situation, whether it's a healing or a deliverance need. And there's actually not just, we don't want to think about that there's a particular saint that's helpful. What we see is in the actual practical exorcism ministry today, it depends on the spirit that you're dealing with in terms of what sin that it fosters. And it also depends on what the person needs in their journey of conversion, the human being that's troubled at that point in the case. And so we don't want to think that, it's only Saint so-and-so that is helpful with exorcism. Mm-hmm. It's actually any saint that is relevant for that person's conversion or to wrestle with the sin that demon promotes. And so, some of these have been often, again, kind of reflecting the early history, the cloistered and religious saints have been, very effective for some people, but it can be any saint. And we see that today. We use relics of many different saints, and it depends on the situation. The bottom line message there is the church noticed very early on that the living saint was super effective, but when they were in heaven, their body was reflective of that status in heaven and was continued to be very effective for helping with deliverance.
Amazing. We're talking today with Adam Blai, Peritus of Religious Demonology for the Diocese of Pittsburgh, and author of the brand new book from Sophia Institute Press called The History of Exorcism. And I know in your book you have you you highlight some of these very famous examples of actual exorcisms, and I know that you yourself are present for some exorcisms or on a weekly basis through your work for the Diocese of Pittsburgh. For those people who have doubts, those people who say, this is something from the past, some carryover from an earlier, more superstitious age, exorcisms don't really do anything, and there's no such thing as genuine demonic possession. What would you say to them? What are the signs of a true demonic possession?
Yeah, so the church had the same concern whether this was real or a medical problem or a mental health problem centuries ago. And she figured out through the experience of many, many people down through time that there's certain signs of possession that you need to look for that kind of go beyond what we could explain away. So, for instance, one of the classic signs is knowledge of all languages. Not just a few, not just, one or two, but any language the demon is interrogated in, it uses with, perfect facility, can speak them, it can respond to them properly. So, we had a case here in Pennsylvania, somebody raised on a farm with a high school education, only spoke English, but they were interrogated in English, French, Latin, Lithuanian, and German, and properly responded to all the languages. So, what I always say is schizophrenia doesn't make you suddenly fluent in ancient languages, right?
Right.
That just isn't part of the disease, nor any other disease does that. The second one is knowledge of hidden things. So a common one is they will air your secret sins to everybody in the room to shame you and try to, rattle your cage and maybe get you to withdraw from this ministry. So again, manic depression doesn't make you suddenly know somebody's secrets. That's especially when they're very specific. I'm not talking about, you stole something once or something vague. I'm talking about, very detailed stuff that reveals that they were present and know all the details of your sins. So that one we can't explain away. The next one is a little weaker, and that's detecting the holy. So if we have a blessed crucifix and one that isn't blessed, you might say, well, a person who's faking knows they should recoil from a crucifix, but they won't react to the one that isn't blessed. Now, they might react to the symbolism of it, but let's take it a little further. If we had 2 bottles of water that were identical that we bought at the gas station, outside of the room, one of them's blessed, one isn't. The possessed person, even in the human state, can tell you which one is blessed every time. And you can do it again with 10 bottles, of which one is blessed. They will still always be able to pick out the one that is blessed. I've also seen them tell the name of the saint whose relic is in your pocket that you haven't mentioned to anybody or shown to anybody, but the demon knows which saints are present in the form of their relics. And then the final one is strength beyond their condition. And that's the weakest of the signs because we do see bursts of strength with adrenaline. And in psychiatric settings, I've worked, for a number of years in the prisons. In psychology, I've seen psychotic strength. The difference with this is they never get tired and the body never weakens. And when the person comes out of the demonic state after the exorcism, they're not tired or sore. They're not aware that their body did these extraordinary exertions. And by the way, Michael, the strength is not just, oh, wow, they're strong. I mean, I'm talking about, not very tall women that maybe weigh 120 pounds throwing 5 men around the room for hours without getting tired and overpowering them repeatedly. You're talking about pretty remarkable displays of strength.
Absolutely amazing. We've been talking today with Adam Blai, Peritus of Religious Demonology for the Diocese of Pittsburgh. You can tell by some of his stories that he's the real deal, and he's been involved in some extremely fascinating cases. And the brand new book is called The History of Exorcism. It's out from Sophia Institute Press. Adam, for people who want to find out more about your ministry or to pick up this book, The History of Exorcism, where can they go for more?
Well, that book can be bought from Sophia Institute Press's website, and that's always the best way to get your Catholic books, because if you go through Amazon, they take a big chunk and they really hurt the publisher. And then I have a site for just information for the public called religiousdemonology.com. And I also have a radio show actually aired here on the EWTN network on Saturdays called The Spirit World that I do with my friend Debbie Georgiani. And there we take calls and answer questions and kind of amplify some of these issues.
Wonderful.
Michael, and not amplify in the sense of like alarm people or scare them, but amplify the explanations and try to explain them.
Wonderful. Well, we're so grateful to you, as always, Adam Blai, for joining us on today's program and for putting together this brand new book, The History of Exorcism. Thanks so much for being with us on the program today.
Thank you, Michael. God bless you, and God bless your listeners.
God bless. That was Adam Blai, Peritus of Religious Demonology for the Diocese of Pittsburgh and author of The History of Exorcism. Check this one out from Sophia Institute Press.
And that's all the time we have for today's show. If you missed any of this episode or want to catch up on past episodes, you can go to EWTN.com/radio, check out the audio archives, or download the free EWTN app. I'd like to thank our guest today, Michael Lichens, from talking about Catholicism and the view of ghosts, and Adam Blai talking to us about the history of exorcism. I'd like to thank you for joining me today on Miracle Hunter, where from claims of healings and visions to the world's most inexplicable events, whether you're a believer or a skeptic, the truth is always worth the hunt. Talk to you next week.